Hey everybody, and welcome to our brand new series of Mindset Monday. So this is our second episode. So if you haven't done so already, make sure and check out the first one. So we are TKD Coach Academy. I'm Richie Ford, and I'm with Adrian Byrne. Together, we're looking to bring the best content for ITF practitioners to bring to their training, performance, and competition standard to the next level. So we also have a designated series for ITF sparring, which is called Fight Chat Friday. So if you haven't checked that out and you're interested in the sparring side of ITF, make sure and check it out and see if that is something that you like. And if that sounds good, be sure to subscribe because that's the kind of content you'll be expecting on this channel here. So we also post daily on Facebook and Instagram. So if you want to get those daily updates, check us out there. So what is Mindset Monday? So Mindset Monday is where we answer your questions that we receive in from Instagram story feature. We put it up every Monday and we answer all the questions to do with the mental side of martial arts training and performance. So the mental side of the training is something that everybody experiences, and sometimes it can be negative, sometimes it can be positive, but either way, it can be a difficult challenge to deal with things like nerves, anxiety, low self-belief, etc. So when you're trying to perform at your best and to bring your potential to the performance and to show your martial arts, then that can be a tricky thing. So we'd like to just shine a light on this topic and maybe help out some people who are listening in to make the most of their training and to shine when it comes to getting on the mats.
Yeah, sounds super. So, excuse me, our first question then was relating to how do you excel or how do you become successful if you have no coach with you at sparring competition? And, I kind of had a very quick look at the questions before we started this one, and that was one that I kind of said, right, I think we actually need to pick an angle on this one. So the interpretation on it that I've kind of jumped at is traveling to competitions, particularly internationally, though we'll also cover the national or local angle as well, where you're not being supported by a coach. So your own coach maybe couldn't go to the competition with you, and is it possible to be successful without the direct support of your coach at that competition? And like, we could think of so many examples of people who've done well and who routinely travel to international competitions, even as major as a European or World Championships, without their personal coach being there. In fact, it's the norm for most people at a European or World Championships that you're not going to have your coach at ringside with you. It's probably going to be a national team coach. And so, it may very well be the case that they're not your normal coach.
And even
So,
at that as well, though, if you come from a successful country, like, for example, Ireland, we have so many people on the floor at any given time. There's only so many coaches. So even if your club coach is present, it's not a guarantee either that you're going to be with that person. So it's definitely something to think about and something to be prepared for mentally.
yeah, it's actually a skill that you could develop in terms of your own self-sufficiency, self-reliance, in terms of traveling and not having that safety net there or that support network there. But I think there are some lessons that we can learn from people who've done it, and some of the things that they've done well that will help to maybe explain the right way to do it and the things that they maybe learned by doing it. And so, most of the people that I could think of, they never very few of them traveled on their own completely. So they may have traveled without their coach, but they would have often traveled with, whether it's a parent, a supporter in terms of like a friend or, a teammate. But they would have been traveling with somebody else. And I think that helps to spread the mental load of a trip, so everything from the booking of the flights, the accommodation, the packing the passports, and all the rest of the stuff. When you have someone else as a sounding board, all of that gets easier. And it does mean that when it comes to the competition, particularly if you're a younger person who hasn't had a lot of travel experience, having a parent or an older brother or sister or someone like that there to kind of, just assure you, yeah, no, it's covered, everything's sorted, we have the taxi booked, we have this, I think is a huge relief that lets you focus on the competing side of things. So for me, that's like one of the first things that you want to be thinking about is, even when you're traveling, can you have a support network? It doesn't necessarily have to be your coach, but it should be someone who can help to support you and doesn't make your life harder, in terms of going to a competition.
Yeah, definitely. And then, like, if you think about this as well, just on from a point of view of being on the mats, it is a strength, and I think it builds mental toughness and mental strength to be able to do that alone as well. to not have to be reliant on your coach, because at the end of the day, you're the only person that's stepping foot onto that center square. It's you and your opponent with 1 meter between you, when it comes to sparring at least. And
Mm-hmm.
also the same principle applies for pattern or whatever you're competing in. Generally, it's up to you to perform. Even if you have somebody along there with you, you need to perform to your own ability to make the most of whatever event you're in. So not having a coach there, it actually builds that strength, I think. So straight off the bat, to answer the question, can you be successful? I think absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's another bit of it that I think is really, really important as well, which is that the rules will state that you have to have a coach in the corner. So what that means is if you travel without your own coach, you're going to need to make or build a relationship with someone else who can sit in and act as your coach, which means you have to have developed a bundle of characteristics for yourself, which are going to be useful in the long term at making you successful, and not just successful without a coach, but successful in general. So if I go to championships and my coach isn't there and I need Richie to coach me, I need to be able to explain to Richie, hey, this is what I know about my opponent. This is what I plan to do. This is how I tend to spar. Expect me to do this. This is how I need to warm up. This is, these are the things I need to hear from you throughout the match or in the interval. And, I need to be able to have that conversation with someone, maybe someone I don't know all that well. So I really have to know myself.
Which means your
first.
self-awareness has
Yeah.
to be through the roof, which is a very, very important skill, I think, in terms of the mental side of performance, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
We only put up a post on this yesterday on Instagram. Well, not yesterday, sorry. We're recording on Friday. But last Thursday, we would have put up a post. So it was about a quote that Bruce Lee said, you have to know yourself to be able to bring that to the forefront then as well. So just that whole idea of self-awareness is so, so important when you're competing, because you're going through emotions, you're going through lots of things that you need to know what is necessary for you to perform at your best. Mm-hmm. And I think that knowing that and being able to articulate that and communicate that with somebody else is something that will actually build your mental strength, I think.
I think the final thing that happens is you'll end up having much more, because you need to do that, people will record more. They'll video their fights. They won't be as reliant on another person's interpretation of their performance. They're going to go to their own interpretation, or almost the crowdsourced interpretation of it. So they'll sit with their friends, or they'll sit with, maybe the person who stepped in to coach them, maybe even some of their competitors, and have a look at the video and say, well, okay, what did I do well? What can I improve on? What else could I have done differently? And, or even when it's been super successful, it's like, okay, still, what did I do well? What could I improve on? Is there something else I could have done under this pressured situation? And, by finding those answers, sometimes the crutch of having someone else to kind of do that for you is limiting. And so try to take the disadvantage of not having the coach and turn it to your advantage by, it's like they say, it's almost like the thing of, if you lose one sense, the other ones get sharper. It's almost that idea, isn't it? It's like, okay, if you don't have a coach to help you interpret this, your own interpretation skills and self-awareness need to improve.
Yeah, I think so. And there's a lesson here as well for coaches of, try to build that autonomy within your students. You don't want them to become very reliant on you, and almost at a case where they can't perform and they can't assess their performance and reflect on things unless you're there. I know, for example, in your own situation, Adrian, you've got a great relationship with some of your athletes, and that's fantastic for them. But then at the same time, it doesn't mean that if you don't have that relationship that you can't be successful, because there's plenty of examples there of people, they don't have that support network really at the same level, but they still can be successful. So I think it's not really something that determines your ability to be successful or not.
Yeah, it's not an absolute limiter. It's one where a good, constructive, positive relationship. And I mean, let's step outside of Ireland or our own experience. But you look at Julio Carlos and William Perlaza, and you'd have to say, those are two guys who just tune in together. They're a phenomenal team. But there are plenty of other people, and you could name so many competitors around the world where you wouldn't even necessarily know who their coach is, but
look at Neil Ernest for people.
That coach,
Yeah, for people who know the old scene, Neil Ernest would have been an example there. He trained himself mostly in Wales, and he came along. He often got a coach from somebody in England, jumped into the seat, and he just did his own thing, and he was often got to the highest level in European and world. So I don't think, as you said, it's not a limiter. Absolutely not.
Yeah. So let's have a look at question number 2, and how to get over the fear of breaking myself again during training. The mental block is huge. So again, we're going to look at this one as maybe an injury, and a recurring injury, or maybe it was a devastating injury that took an awful lot to recover from, and overcoming the mental block of resuming training and trying to get back into normality. And you wouldn't envy anyone that particular challenge. It's a tough one.
It can be tricky, definitely. And I think the biggest thing here is patience. I think you have to be patient. You can't kind of rush it. You can't force it. You need to give yourself that time to build up. We mentioned this in last week's episode, evidence. It's such an important thing for us mentally, that we need to have that reassurance and awareness that, okay, everything is fine and I can go back to performing how I performed previously. So you need to build up that evidence, and the only way you can do that with injuries is just patience and gradually taking a step further. I think that it's important as well to note that you probably need to have a lot of trust in your training partners and people who you're working with for this to be possible. So you can't go out there with people that you don't really trust really well, that are going to go almost like gung-ho and more for their gain as opposed to mutual benefit. So I think that that's a very important thing to think about. But when you think about it right now, it's probably the best time ever to be injured, because there's not much going on. You have plenty of time to recover, plenty of time to be patient, and to build up that evidence gradually that you're able to perform again.
Yeah, and I mean, as much as it's very daunting at the moment, one of the things that being a little bit daunted by it or put off by it or nervous about it does set a rate limiter. So the people who are most likely to re-injure are the ones who are under pressure, putting themselves under pressure to jump back in quickly to meet a deadline, to do whatever it happens to be. And that's often very risky and dangerous. Whereas, if you're in the position where you're reintroducing yourself to your sport and you're not putting yourself under pressure to be 100% the best you ever were right away, that's an advantage. There are plenty of success stories of people who've come back from particularly nasty injuries and made a full recovery and gone back into competition and done very, very well. But even starting from outside of that, going back to what Richie was saying about the evidence, I would say you have a couple of different ways that you can build that. And sometimes it's like retesting, but in a different environment. So if you're nervous, for example, about sparring, well, can you start it with something like weightlifting? Can you start it with something like, okay, is cycling good? Is swimming good? Can I go, trail running? Is that good? How about, a little bit of plyometrics? How's that feeling? And as you gradually reintroduce yourself to activities that have the same kind of function or load as the activity that you're afraid of, you'll find the fear won't be there for those activities to the same degree, because there's no memory of how the injury happened. But then you are building that evidence base that actually I am recovered, actually I'm fine. Or you'll realize you're not recovered and you're not fine, and you need to do additional, prehab work or rehab work to get you into a position where you are good to go. And last thing we would want is anyone held together with sticky tape, and you want to do your rehab correctly and be in a good position to go again. And then there's the advice that, well, can you use this time? Because in using this time, you don't want to have it of, I would do this if I got better. You want to be kind of setting yourself as, well, when I'm better or when I'm recovered, these are the things that I'm going to do. And by having positive hooks and anchors in the future that are things that you're working towards now, that when your body lines up and the recovery is complete, that you can continue working on. So working on your mental, skills. I think we have one of the questions that's coming up later that will kind of give some ideas on this, but working on your mental training, your imagery, your rehearsal, your say positive affirmations and things like that now is the perfect time to be doing that, because you're also giving yourself permission to look to a future where your injury is behind you and you're working away as normal. So you need to believe that there is a time in the future where your injury isn't a problem for you. Otherwise it's going to be very, very difficult for you to overcome the present where you're nervous and worried about the injury because it's been a problem for you for however long.
There's going to be coming a point as well where you want to be able to pull that trigger again, and you don't want to step on the competition floor in particular, or be it even like a grading or the training floor and not be able to pull the trigger when you want to, like, that can be that can affect you in other ways then as well. Your confidence starts to be affected and things like that. So yeah, I think it's important to be patient and really give yourself that time that is necessary.
Definitely. Let's have a look at a third question. So this is the one I was mentioning there. So how to keep motivated during the quarantine. Any mental workouts to share? So I think the first thing to say is we can empathize because yeah, we're locked down as well. We've got nowhere to go, and Zoom is only so attractive, but we're doing it. And yeah, I think that's the motivation part of it is remembering as well that motivation comes and goes. It's not
like it's very time and mood dependent, isn't it? And
absolutely.
that's the whole thing about motivation. It's not everlasting.
No.
It's more about the bigger why behind of what you're doing. So whatever you're doing, like for example, like we just mentioned, for me, when I'm coaching, usually I'm really interested in picking up new things, reading books, listening to podcasts, trying to get in new information, and then put that into action with my classes and my students and my athletes. But now the fact that that has been taken back, the motivation for it seems to lack a little bit because it's time dependent and it's not really something that we can put into action right now. So then it comes back to thinking about the bigger picture and your why. What is your big purpose for doing it? I think that's the deeper meaning here, but behind motivation of whether it's like you want to be a world champion, whether you want to become a black belt. The reason of why is more important than the short term motivation, which is very, as we said, time and mood dependent.
Yeah, definitely. And once you've got that established why, then it's about, I suppose, establishing routines and habits. And I mean, I have no idea what number Fight Chat Friday we just did. And for anyone who doesn't know, we would tend to record our Fight Chat Fridays of a Thursday to give some time for editing and all the rest of it. But that means that we have to have found our topic by Monday or Tuesday. We have to gone and found our videos on the Wednesday, edit the clips, set the scenes, do all of the work. That has to be done on the Wednesday night or the Thursday morning, so it can happen every Thursday. And you don't always feel it, on a Monday or Tuesday or a Wednesday, but it's going to happen. And because it's going to happen, you get to have a very enjoyable chat of a Thursday morning. But to get to the very enjoyable chat of a Thursday morning, you have to have and follow your routines. And it's the same things as always happen with it. You've got to set yourself up with attractors, so things that encourage you to want to do the things that are part of your routine. You have to associate negative consequences with the things that are going to take away from that. So you have to be accountable. You have to follow all those usual little guidelines around establishing good habits. And, there's some great literature you can get into and books you can read around forming habits and the rest of it. But the principles are really, really solid. You want to make it so that it's something that you don't even think to do. It's Thursday. That's what I do. And when you have a good enough reason behind it and you believe enough in your, the goal behind it, then it's easier to follow through on that habit. But you also need a critical number of repeats. So the big thing to say for that motivation, remember, motivation is entirely transient. You'll have it, you'll lose it. The habits and the routines are far more permanent. And reflecting back on your why and really understanding what it is that you're actually aiming for in the longer run will help you get through it. And also to understand we are all going to find it hard. That's fine. Tap into that support network, have a chat, get into the zone, just do training you like, do anything, because it is really a tough time for everyone.
You should just do what your natural interests in that moment want you to do. And I think that's the best way to go about it. And then when you think about it, in terms of if it is your training, like what interests me right now, maybe I want to do flexibility training. That's going to help the bigger picture of the why or the end goal that I want to get. So there's always things you can do to keep pushing forward. But it's just, I think that's the big lesson here, is to find out what your reason is, your driver, your why. And there's a good exercise, if you Google or YouTube the 7 levels deep. It's a good exercise to really get down and deep in the levels of why you want to achieve a particular task or a goal. And I think that's a good exercise for anybody at the moment who has a particular goal and maybe they're losing a bit of motivation. It's a nice exercise to examine and to see if that's actually something that you really want.
Yeah, and there was something that was on the radio last night actually, and it was talking about the restrictions that are in place around arts and arts classes and dance and music and so on. And the question, or the way that the interviewer kept bringing it up was, oh yeah, it's very important for people to have their hobbies. I was like, I was twitching, it's like, because, we're in the same situation, and I could tell that the person on the other side, like they were a dance teacher or something, they're in the same situation. It's like, this isn't my hobby, and it's because you have that bigger why. I mean, if this was your hobby and your hobby was interrupted, you completely get over it. If you can't do the things that you do for a bit of diversion, like if I can't watch Netflix, I'm fine. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. Netflix will be there when I get back to it. It's a hobby. The reason this is bothering you and the motivation matters to you. You don't need to be motivated to watch Netflix. That's different. The reason that the motivation bothers you is because it's more than a hobby. It's something you want more from than just a simple hobby. So it could be recreational still, but you have goals around it. You're feeling limited by the restrictions, and it's about exploring what's possible within those limits. And maybe once you really know what your why is and what your overall goal is, you can find the things that are still possible within these restrictions. And I think that's a good guidance for me and for most of us.
Absolutely, yeah. Good advice.
Number 4. So, I want to be as calm as possible in competition. Do you want to be as calm as possible in competition sparring, or want to have some level of intensity? So, really great question. Love this one.
Yeah, this is a good one. We kind of actually hit a bit of this on Fight Chat Friday from last Friday. So if you want to go check that out, I think it might be a good one as well. We on proactive and reactive side of things. So it kind of plays into this a little bit. And for me, I think this question is actually there's a couple of bits to it. But first off, I think it's really individual in terms of it depends on your personality, and it depends on what kind of a person you are. Like, for example, for me, I was generally a counter style fighter. I think that went with my personality well, because generally I'm kind of like playful and outgoing and things like that. Whereas I wouldn't be a very intense character. So if I was like gung-ho, aggressive, forward, pedal to the metal, like that wouldn't really ever suited my style, I feel. So it doesn't make sense for you to kind of go against the grain and be completely different to how you are as a person. So that's first off. But there is a stipulation. I think you do need a balance. And there's that whole idea of yin and yang that we spoke about that as well before recording, that you need to have that balance of you. If you're always reactive or you're always intense, then it's not going to always be of value to you, because you need to be you need to be unpredictable first of all, but then you need to be able to have different strengths and almost like different tools in your toolbox. So I think that it is important to really play to who you are and what you naturally feel obliged to be. But there is that balance that you need to get. Like, you want to go in there calm, but you want to be going in there ready. You don't want to be going in there calm and switched off. You don't want to be going in there intense and overwhelmed and absolutely wound. So that there is that balance that you need to get.
Yeah, and I think maybe something that you can add to that then is, taking all of that on board, is that calmness doesn't necessarily mean that you are super relaxed and chilled. Calmness could actually just be calmness of the mind, that you're focused on the right things. Your efforts are directed at the appropriate things, and beyond that, you're not overly excitable. And you've often for years and years and years, commentators on fight sports will look at people's demeanor as they come to the ring. And if someone just looks dead set, focused and expressionless, all of a sudden it's like, they're an assassin. They're clinical, they're whatever. And that's the thing that gets put off. If someone's kind of playful, they're high-fiving the crowd, they're doing whatever else, then it's going to be, there's going to be something else said about them. If they're bouncing and hopping and, and the eyes are wild or whatever, it's like, oh, okay, this guy's really, and there's an awful lot that's superficial about that. And really what you're wanting going into the sparring ring is to be, as I said, as mentally aroused or as physically like prepared and I suppose they're excited, or having the energy level right to where you're as intense, as up for it, as I always kind of just think of this anxiety arousal curve. So it's like on the one side of it, you're anxious, it's not good, it's suppressing like the thoughts, actions, behaviors that you need. And on the other side, you're over aroused and you're hyper, and your focus is flitting from thing to thing, and you're draining nervous energy, and you don't want to be in either of those cases. And within the middle band, there's room to be more playful, more relaxed, or more hyper, more more kind of intense. And it depends on the personality there. So for everyone, there's a way too far on the right, way too far on the left. And within the middle band, the Goldilocks zone, there's still room for for each of us to be our own special little snowflake and have the right level for us. And I think the skill is knowing how to manipulate it up or down to where you need it to be.
Yeah. Like you need to be calm when you come there, because you don't want to be, as you said, you don't want to be like feeling really anxious, and you don't want to be overwhelmed. But then at the same time, you need to be ready to pull the trigger when it's time to pull the trigger. And it's getting that balance, absolutely. And I think we've spoke about this in one of the earlier questions of that self-awareness. When we spoke about people who are competing without a coach, having that self-awareness of what you need and what kind of a game you have, what type of a person you are, all of those things play into the self-awareness of knowing how to get yourself ready, how to prepare yourself. And if you need to adjust and tweak things, maybe you're too overwhelmed there and you need to just take it back a notch, calm down. Maybe you're too intense, maybe you're too hyper, and then you just get a adrenaline dump and you're not feeling really good. So it's knowing yourself. And I think that's just, it takes time. There's a bit of trial and error with that.
For sure.
So you need to experience as many I suppose times to perform when we get nervous, and when there's those moments. It's not really the same when we're in training and things are a little bit more comfortable. So the more tournaments you can get to, the more performances, gradings, those kind of things that you can get out in front of a crowd and time to perform, you can kind of play with that and find your own little niche, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely have a look at some of the tools for bringing yourself either up the scale or down the scale. So we talked about the muscular relaxation, 5-breath technique, etc., in terms of calming people down. And we talked about hitting and warm-up routines and activators and so on, in terms of getting you up the scale and a little bit more intense, ready for a match. And you need to play with those and identify where you are, and consistently working with a coach to find the right spot is a big part of it.
Yeah, all definitely. Right. So we've hit good 4 questions there, so we've helped at least 4 people. So that's a great video done. But if you want to get involved next week, make sure and keep an eye on our Instagram story feature on Mondays. So every Monday we'll put up the question feature there, where you can just pop in your questions. We'll pick up some questions every Monday for next week's episode. So anybody looking to get involved and to have your questions answered, be sure and get involved there.
Super. We'll see you next week.
See you next time.